Well, filter-free America is where I wanna be. Arriving on the shining black shores of oil-soaked Lady Liberty, with justice not just blind, but deaf, dumb, and unkind. Thank God I'm filter-free. It's filter-free America.
Motherfucker!
Hello, Filter-Free America podcast listeners. Welcome back to the Filter-Free America podcast. All right, guys, I got a great podcast episode ready for you right here. But before I talk about the guest, let me talk about the my experiment, my test that I had going into this episode. Okay, as I've mentioned many times, the lifeblood, the drive, the mission statement, if you will, of the Filter Free America podcast is at its core is exploring humanity through conversation and testing the ongoing theory that every single person walking or rolling, if they don't have any functional legs, or maybe they don't have any legs at all, whichever, they all have a story about them, something that's interesting about them, no matter who it is, right? Even the most boring, most mundane personality type individual has at least one good story. And my goal is to try to dig that story out, capture that story, and present it to you in the form of interesting podcast content. Okay, now with that reminder, this was the test that I did. I was like, it's really easy to find interesting stories when you're talking about, drug dealers, or I don't know, what else have we talked about? We've talked about people with crazy medical conditions, things like that. Those stories are pretty easy to find. They're right there on the surface. They're low-hanging fruit, not from quality, but for ease of a podcast producer. Easy to get to type stories, okay? So I wanted to test my theory and go to the extreme other direction. I wanted to find subject matter that on the surface, if you really look at it hard, your brain tells you this is going to be fucking boring, all right? So I decided to test that, right? And I decided to talk to an insurance agent. Yeah, right? I know, right? That sounds fucking boring. I like, when I thought of the idea, half of my brain went to sleep when the term insurance agent popped in. I'm like, this, no way is talking to an insurance agent going to be interesting at all, right? But that half of my brain was wrong. And the half of my brain that does a lot of drugs said, no, let's do this. There's going to be an interesting story here. You just got to have the conversation and make it happen. And boy, was the drug using side of my brain correct this time, as it is often. The guest this episode is a handsome gentleman by the name of Jeffery Rogers. Jeffery Rogers. And as my intro has implied already, he works in the insurance agency. He started out in the insurance agency as a insurance fraud investigator, and now he is what is called a commercial line producer, right? And yes, I was confused by that title too, commercial line producer. Like, what do you cut lines of coke for a living? Is that what you do? No, and I was mistaken, sadly. But no, he sells insurance now. That's what he does, right? Super good guy too. Let me say that up front. Dude, I really enjoyed having this conversation. Very interesting dude, and just a fun guy to talk to. What we cover in this episode, we start out with the basics, his training to get to the position that he's in today. I ask him a little bit about the money, how much money you can make in there. It's a lot of money, and all the basics. But probably the stories he has about being an insurance fraud investigator are some of the best parts of it. Super funny and interesting stories about what insurance companies do to investigate people making claims, especially ones that they know to be erroneous. Big word. What else was there? He also is, from his time as, his current position selling insurance, he's got some pretty crazy stories about policies that he's sold and issues within the insurance company that he has to deal with, including a story that included road rage, shooting, and an attempted cover-up. Yeah, you got to hang in there for that story too. Lots of good shit. Let me give a couple plugs for him as well too. Again, I mentioned his name was Jeffery Rogers, Rogers. And if you want to talk to him, he's with Assured Partners. That's the name of the company. And if you want to contact him and talk to him about insurance stuff, maybe you want to get a policy. I got a policy through him. I've actually insured my balls through him, just in case I cut them while I'm shaving or something. But anyway, just send him an email to jrogers@apminnesota.com. Again, that's jrogers, Rogers, @apminnesota.com. The AP stands for Assured Partners, or maybe Adrian Peterson. I don't know. One of those two things. But he specializes in contractors' liability, and he covers all over the Midwest. So if you're so inspired to contract something, get some insurance for it. Real fast, let me mention the sponsor of the podcast, simplewebsite.us, simplewebsite.us, simplewebsite.us. Regular listeners, say it with me. You know what they do, right? They build you a website using the Squarespace website builder, right? Now, when some of you guys hear that, you're like, I've heard about Squarespace. You're supposed to be able to do it yourself. What are you, stupid, Joey? Yeah, I am sometimes, especially when it comes to technical shit. So if you're like me and you want help using Squarespace, or you want somebody to do it completely for you, go to simplewebsite.us. That's what they do. They have like a bunch of like computer masterminds locked in a closet there. I can't confirm this, but I was told this, okay? I heard that they went around the country and they kidnapped all the expert technical people that know how to use Squarespace. They kidnapped them, right? And they locked them into a basement and they chained them against the wall and they feed them like fucking pudding and shit, right? But what they do is they force those programmers to make websites, right? And they force them under the threat of murder and death. And if we've learned anything in life, it's that people do things under the threat of murder and death way better than any other threat, right? So they make the websites, right? So what you do is you just contact the people who are holding these people prisoner, send them a little bit of money, and they will build you a website. They will force those people in between their pudding mills to make you a website, and they do it really, really good. They do. Also, even if you don't want your website built from the ground up, right, they will just help you build a website that you're working on yourself. If you have one issue here, one issue there, they'll be more than happy to take a look at that and help you improve a website that you're building on Squarespace on your own already. Also, if you have got it all figured out and you don't need any programmers, any smart people locked in basements eating pudding to help you, you're just going to do it completely on your own, I still suggest to going to simplewebsite.us, because if you go there, you will find some free tips and tricks that you can add to your already clearly abundant skill set of website building. And that's completely free. It doesn't cost you any money. Free. But just go to simplewebsite.us, simplewebsite.us, simplewebsite.us. All right. Lastly, before we kick this episode off, please take time to make sure you're subscribed. If you're listening to this podcast for the very first time, you like what you're hearing. I've already mentioned my balls and people locked in basements, so clearly you're on the right path to finding entertainment excellence here. Subscribe, right? Subscribe so you get alerts and reminders every time I drop another high-quality, filter-free America podcast episode. It's right there for you. Get a little reminder on your phone, doohickey, whatever, right? Also, if you've already subscribed, good for you. Good for you. You're halfway there to being a fantastic and superior Filter-Free America podcast listener fan. Next step you need to do to achieve that title is to leave a rating and review. There we go. Spit the words out. Rating and review, especially if you're on iTunes. Go to, what is it called now? I keep saying iTunes or whatever, but it's all separate now, right? Because it's Apple Podcasts and Apple Music. All right, so go to Apple Podcasts, find Filter Free America on Apple Podcasts, leave a 5-star rating, 5 stars. That's all we accept here. It's just 5 stars. I'm sorry. Save your 4 stars. We need 5 stars here. And leave a little review, right? If you enjoy the podcast that you get for free, the least you could do is leave a little bit of a message that says, hey, I enjoy listening to this podcast. It's really great, right? You could do that verbatim. Like, you don't even, I don't care. You can totally say that exactly word for word, and that would be just enough. Or you can embellish a little bit. You could be like, hey, I was playing the Filter Free America podcast in a hospital with a room full of cancer patients, and the minute Joy started talking, all their cancer went away. It was amazing. His voice is magical. Make sure you subscribe. Yeah, something like that. Just turn it up a notch. That kind of thing. A little bit of embellishment never hurt anybody. All right, let's kick off this episode because you don't need to hear me talk anymore. What are we going to call this one? Well, let's see. We talk about him being in the insurance industry, and he is a private investigator. What are we going to call this? Private investigator for the insurance industry. There we go. There's no thought at all put into that. Just totally making that off the cuff. Okay, so here we go. Here's the episode. Private investigator for the insurance industry with Jeffery Rogers right here on the Filter Free America podcast. Let's go.
There are no provisions in your policy for a procedure of this magnitude.
Do you have life insurance? If you do, you could always use a little more.
It's a less expensive policy, but unfortunately there are some restrictions.
To me, a claims man is a surgeon. That desk is an operating table, and those pencils are scalpels and bone chisels. And those papers are not just forms and statistics and claims for compensation. They're alive. They're packed with drama, with twisted hopes and crooked dreams.
So start by telling me, how long have you been in the insurance game?
Well, I've had 2 different stints in insurance. This time around has been 2 years. I'm a licensed producer. I focus on contractors and construction companies. My first go-around in insurance was from the other end. It was more of a service aspect for the insurance companies themselves. I functioned as a private investigator for Northern Reporting Service based in Minneapolis, and I did that for a couple years.
Oh, so this isn't like you didn't move from one position to another. You just got into that area. You were doing the investigation.
Yep. When I first met my wife, I was a private investigator. I think that's the line that I used at the bar to pick her up. She didn't believe me. But yeah, it sounds like a glamorous
insurance investigation, almost like CIA. Almost.
Yeah, basically. Oh, you'd be surprised at the tickets I used to be able to talk myself out of. You do, because you're typically, as a private investigator, you're parked in suburban neighborhoods, right. And more often than not, especially in today's society, people are leery of predators, be it sexual or whatever, right. And they would call in because I'm in a minivan and my windows are all blacked out, not like tinted, but actual black curtains hanging so you can't see in, and that does look alarming during the middle of the day, especially if they don't recognize the van. So I would have to call in at like 5 a.m. saying I'm going to be in Coon Rapids conducting surveillance from 6 a.m. until 4 p.m. today, or if I'm in whatever town.
Let the cops know,
yeah.
So when people start calling in, there's a creeper in our neighborhood.
Then they'll tell them, yeah, he's actually working for us, because I'm doing insurance fraud is a crime, and it's not something that your typical police force is equipped to handle because the man hours needed to conduct surveillance on day-to-day citizens is.
Have you ever had an incident like where you're out there filming or doing whatever, doing an investigation, and the cops get called and the cops come to investigate you and not know? Or
no, because like I said, I'd make my presence known to the local PD, but I have used police as a cover-up when I was being followed by a claimant that I was following. So let's say,
a reverse investigation. Yeah, they start following you.
Because it's my job to not only sit on people's houses and film them but if they leave the house, I have to conduct surveillance on their day-to-day activities. And sometimes you can't always be so nondescript, especially on like country roads. You take a right, go 4 miles, take a left, and I'm the only other car on the road and I'm going the same way. It's kind of obvious that you're being followed after so long. So I've had instances where they'd pull over and I have to just keep driving and act like I'm not there, and then they'll follow me. I had one driver that was following me and became erratic and speeding up on me. And
did he know who you were, or he just thought you were some weirdo?
He thought I was following him because, well, I was, but he basically busted me for following him, and he was speeding up and almost tried to rear end me. And I started driving erratic on the highway on purpose, and I got pulled over by a police officer. I sped up to 85 as I saw a cop on the side of the road, and I sped up and was swerving on purpose just so he would pull me over and the guy would have to fly by. And then I told the police officer, "Oh, thank you so much for pulling me over. You have no idea. You just saved me." He's like, "What are you talking about?" I was like, "Well, I'm a private investigator, and I was following that Ford truck, and he was following me, and I thought he was coming maybe to harm me because he noticed that I was following me." And the cop said, "Don't fucking use us like that," and let me go.
I think that's a good idea. What do you?
I also tried once I tried the old going to the car wash thing to get away from somebody as well, but
And that didn't work?
No, it didn't work.
Has anybody ever knew what you were doing? Like they said, they knew that they're a claimant or whatever, and you're watching them and they figured it out? Has that ever happened?
The realization of who I am to them. I mean, I've interacted with people that I'm doing surveillance on in certain situations because you have to, but the more often than not, when they realize who I am and what I'm doing, it would be in a courtroom when they see me, showing up as a professional witness. But no, if I get busted, typically I would just drive. I've only ever been busted about 4 or 5 times by people that I'm following, so it's pretty infrequent, but it does happen. It's part of the job.
Right. What is it like when you're in court and they realize that, oh, you're that motherfucker's been sitting in the van?
Yeah,
in front of my house. And
one specific one I had to get kind of intimate with. I was taxed with conducting surveillance on a work comp claim. A lady worked in a factory in the Anoka County area, and she was out on work comp for about 6 months, and they wanted me to tail her. Well, I found out that she was working moonlighting for a local bowling alley, and I needed to get film of her doing that job. So I posed as an appraiser for mortgages, and I brought in a computer, and you can't just walk into a bar and start filming and everybody's gonna be okay with that. You're gonna ask questions, so I had to conceal my camera. I had a little camera, and I put it in that little 6-pack container that looks like a beer 6-pack thing, but typically at a bar, restaurant, mom and pop dive bar type place, it'd have ketchup and mustard and silverware, salt and pepper.
Food from the last 3 diners that ate there, stuck on the side.
Yeah, some garbage, empty cigarette packs.
Right.
So I turned the ketchup sideways and laid it flat, and I put my camera on top of that, and I pulled up my laptop, and I leaned a newspaper up against it, and I just sat and pointed at the bar, and I filmed the lady doing her job as a bartender, but she was also the only one in service, so she would come over and chat with me and serve me lunch, and I went up there probably 6 or 7 times and filmed her doing this job, which she wasn't supposed to be doing because she had a lifting restriction of 5 or 10 pounds, and I got her carrying cases of booze and cases of beer, a couple cases at a time, which has to be 40, 50 pounds, and obviously she was able to.
She was totally busting.
My job as a private investigator when I worked for Northern Reporting Service essentially was to minimize outpays of claims for insurance companies. There was a few cases, is my wife cheating on me, but those are pretty few and far between. Most private investigator firms don't like taking those cases.
Oh, so when you were in this investigating the insurance stuff, you weren't like an insurance company investigator. You were literally a private investigator who did other stuff too? Yeah,
well, our firm did everything for different clients, but my main focus was work comp cases, but Northern Reporter Service wasn't specifically an insurance investigation company. That's their main focus. I'd say it's probably 90% of their business.
Is that pretty common as far as private investigators go now? They're just really working as subcontractors for insurance companies?
More, I would think so. I mean, in my experience, I know 4 different agencies in Minnesota alone that's basically all that they do. But of course, I mean, we've all seen, what is that show, Cheaters? Mm-hmm. There are those type of investigators, and of course, the Jessica Joneses of the world, Find My Kid or whatever, that type of shit. But most private investigators are servicing work comp claims because people get hurt at work, and if there's no waiver of subrogation in place, basically meaning that if you're an employee, you can't sue your company because you're essentially suing yourself. That's what a waiver of subrogation would do. But a third party...
Is that common with businesses?
Most businesses do have something like that in place for work comp. The exception to that would be like, let's say I'm driving truck and I get hurt on the job and you put me in this truck and you knew the brakes were bad or the tires were bald and you created a situation where I hurt myself.
Negligence type thing.
Yeah, it's called employer liability. So I personally couldn't sue my company for putting me in that vehicle, but my wife could because she's not in any way a contract or a contracted employee with that entity.
Right.
So
if you were killed, she could sue in your estate's name and all
absolutely.
that. Okay.
But if I were to die, work comp would pay for the death of loss and probably 3 times my annual salary or whatever the life insurance policy through my work would be. But my wife could go above and beyond that and sue in addition because of employer's liability. And that's what that insurance is for.
What is the when you're doing the investigations, you're sitting in your van watching somebody, what's the creepiest thing you've ever caught somebody doing? There's got to be some nose picking and some ass grabbing and
sure. It's
anybody jerking off and
mainly me. It's boring in the van. Literally most days
when they do it, you get to do it. Is that how it works?
Yeah.
Bob's going. It's time for my turn.
It's a race. When you say private investigator, you think peeping Tom, but that's not really it. Generally speaking, you're in a suburban environment, and I'm parked about a block, maybe 2 blocks. Sometimes I have a view of the front door,
right.
But more often than not, I'm just sitting somewhere where I can see the top of your road. So if your car leaves, I can follow you.
Okay.
But it's pretty boring. Most days you're just sitting in a van, and it could be, especially in Minnesota, we have all 4 seasons. So in the winter, it's freezing. My car can't be running. That's going to attract attention. And in the summertime, my car, it's going to be hot. I have a little fan that plugs in, but it's mostly just watching, like DVDs on my Blu-ray player or something like that, and just hoping that you leave so I don't have to sit here in this car all day. A lot of peeing in bottles.
Right. Or just, hanging out the door. That's, one of the tactics, especially at night. What about, insurance fraud would be a crime, but have you ever caught or observed them commit a crime just randomly, like
No.
Drug purchases or...
I did see, in Northeast Minneapolis, I did see a liquor store get robbed while I was on a case.
Okay, but it wasn't the guy you were following.
It wasn't the guy I was following. I was just
Which if you're injured, you should be robbing a liquor store if your back hurts.
And honestly, I didn't even know it was a
register.
robbery until after the police showed up, because I saw a guy go into a gas station or go into a liquor store and then kind of hustle out. And like 10 minutes later, I saw a bunch of squad cars. So I wasn't a character witness, or I didn't get involved myself, but I did witness what end up being a robbery. I wasn't, a party to it. But no, I've never seen anybody break the law other than just, obviously being able to function way better than what they're claiming they're injured. Like, if you say you can't lift weight, being able to, mow or, walk, or supposed to be on crutches or using a walker or a cane, people, functioning at a much higher level than what they say they can do. Okay. It's pretty common.
What would be like the most extreme as far as somebody claiming that they couldn't do anything, but then you caught them, I don't know, skydiving or some shit like that? Is there the
most extreme one we didn't talk about? We talked about a few things. We didn't talk about this one. Is a camping trip that I had to take out of nowhere. I was heading to a spot in St. Paul. Mm-hmm. And I was just going to spot check it, make sure he was there. Well, when I got there, he was loading up his camper. And he's carrying bins, boxes, all kinds of stuff, and loading into the truck. And
what was the injury that he claimed?
He was supposed to be having a wrist guard on. He had broken his arm, and he wasn't supposed to be able to use his left arm for anything. And I got him carrying all kinds of stuff. Well, I called it in, and I said, "Hey, John, who was my contact at Northern Reporting Service, this guy's loading up a camper. Can I leave?" And he's like, "No, you got to go where he's going." I'm like, "He could be going to fucking Colorado. I don't know where he's going." Well, he ended up going all the way up into the Superior National Forest. And I was literally just going there that day to do a spot check, say that he was there, because he was on work comp, but he had said that he was out sick, and they just wanted me to confirm that he was home. So they'd hired me just to do a check. Right. So I went there, and he's loading up a camper. Obviously, he's not sick. This is on a Friday. And I have my suit in the back of my van. I'm supposed to be going to a wedding, so I'm not prepared to go anywhere. I ended up having to follow this
Definitely
guy.
not camping.
I had to follow this guy from St. Paul all the way up to the Superior National Forest in northern Minnesota. It was a 4.5 hour drive, and there is no like legitimate camping area there. It's just like if he went to a campground, I can check in and just go camp on the other side of the ground and maybe do spot checks. Well, this isn't. There's no fire rings. I mean, there's no nothing. There's no organized anything. So I called John and I said, okay, he's up at this lake. It's called Lake Wilson in the middle of nowhere. There's not a store for probably 30 miles. He says, well, guess what you're doing this weekend? And I said, going home? He said, no. He's like, you're going to have to figure out a way to go, stay up there. And film him do all this shit. So I had to go to the local store up there, which is a Pomida, and I ended up buying a tent, chairs, food for the weekend.
Company pays for all this stuff.
Well, yeah, I got reimbursed for everything.
Okay.
I went to a boat rental place in Beaver Bay, and I had to rent a boat and a truck to tow the boat. And
What?
Yes. And I ended up fishing. I ended up camping by myself in the middle of the woods for a full weekend and fishing in a bay across and filming him and his family while they were up there for the whole weekend.
Did you catch anything?
I got him lifting stuff. I got him.
No, did you catch anything when you were fishing?
I caught some walleye. Yeah. But I had to stay up there, and like I said, I missed out on my friend Kayla's wedding.
Oh man.
And yeah.
Is that how the job is? Or like, fuck your personal life? You just
Pretty much. I mean, it's a pretty lonely gig. It was 40 to 50 hours a week in the van, and you're never. The cool thing about it is you get paid by the mile plus hourly, and you get paid the second you turn your car on in the morning and until you get out of your car at night. So I mean, some days I might work from 5 a.m. until 1 a.m.
Is there any limit on expenses for things that you could involve? Like
when it comes to if I'm like
if they go, he's going to the Vikings game. I guess I got to buy tickets. Go watch the Vikings.
That didn't. I'll tell you about the state fair, but I did buy food. I got to expense everything. And I still have the tent, and I bought a new coat. I made him.
Oh, you got to keep it too.
Yeah, I got to keep it.
Holy shit.
I bought a new Columbia jacket that I made him pay for because it's fucking cold up there in the North Shore. They got the lake effect. It's got to be 25 degrees colder up there than at any point of the year than it is here.
Right.
A camping chair. I basically went and spent like $450 at Pomida on camping shit, and then plus the $250 for the boat, and I think it was another $150 for the truck.
Holy
I
shit.
expensed all that. Yeah, they reimbursed for everything. So I mean, you need to have a credit card if you're going to be a private investigator because they're going to be impromptu expenses.
Right.
But I think that job total with food and everything was probably close to $1,000 that I expensed back to them.
But do they depending on the case, do they tell you can't spend over X amount? Is there any kind of limitation in that context? Is there?
Well, there's mandatory minimums. Like if I'm going to be driving more than 100 miles because mileage is included in pay, then I'm required to stay in a hotel. Mm-hmm. So, or reasonable accommodations, in this instance, camping because they wanted me on site. But if I have to get a hotel, and if I have to get a hotel, then I get $35 a day per diem in addition to the hotel for food and things like that.
Nice.
So yeah, I mean, that type of stuff is all built into the package. So, and I got sent to cases from Minnesota to Nebraska, both the Dakotas, Wisconsin, Iowa, all over the place.
This is you traveling to those areas, getting paid for travel.
Yeah, getting paid for travel.
Holy shit. Yeah. So back to the camping one. So like at night when you're camping and you've got your tent, are you set up down from his tent, or how close are you? I
was on the other side of the lake in a bay, but I could see where they were at and their fire. They were on like a point, and I could see them. Zoom only works so well in the dark, but I would basically film them in the morning as they were getting up, which sounds creepy because instead of
it's like there's two people that do what you do. It's insurance investigators and like fucking creepers.
I called it random guy paparazzi.
That's hilarious.
Was basically it because that's what it felt like. I'm taking pictures and excited about getting footage of people that I could give a shit less about. But
right.
I mean, yeah.
Holy shit.
That was the gig.
I assume you can't tell me specific names or anything, but have you ever had to investigate somebody of prominence or fame at all? Not
really, no. Couple of business owners that had filed claims against their own work comp. In general, now that I've been on the other side of insurance, most business owners, if you have 50 or less people, exclude themselves from work comps. So they're not subject to this type of stuff.
Right.
But there was a few contractors that did. There was a roofer up in roofing and siding contractor. He's not a famous person, but he had a really big fucking house.
There's very few famous roofers.
Yeah, very few.
It's not a big.
That's about it, yeah. But the one that I can think of that was the business owner, he had fallen off a roof and was supposed to be in a neck brace, and he was not supposed to be able to lift more than 5 or 10 pounds. And I ended up, this is another, oddly enough, I ended up fishing to catch him because he was up in Strawberry Lake, Minnesota. If you have any idea where that is, Detroit Lakes is about 3 hours northeast of here, or northwest of here. And it's about another 15, 20 miles past that. So like I said before, in most cases, I'd be parked on the side of the road in a suburban area where I'm pretty inconspicuous.
Right.
Typical private investigator vans are going to be white, silver, or tan because they're the most common vehicles on the road.
Right.
So that's what we are mandated to drive. Even with that common...
Is that vehicle provided to you? Or?
No, I had to go buy my own.
Okay.
Yeah.
But do they compensate you for the cost of the van?
They reimbursed me for payments while I was working there, yeah. So
okay.
I had to pay for the vehicle and finance it myself, but they would reimburse me. I think it was up to $300.
So if you didn't get the van paid off before you stopped working, you'd have to pay the difference.
Right.
Okay.
But basically the mileage covered the insurance, and they reimbursed me. I think it was $365 or $385 a month for the payments on the vehicle. So basically it was free.
Okay.
But until I left. But you can't do that up in the northern woods because there's no suburbs, there's no communities. You can't. But this guy lived on a lake called Strawberry Lake, and they did have a resort. So I ended up staying at the resort, and I was there for, I think, 2 weeks straight. And every day I would just go fish in his bay or the adjacent bay to where he lived on the lake. And while he was supposed to be at home resting and unable to move, he was actually carrying 75-pound bundles of shingles up onto his roof and roofing his own house.
Jesus Christ.
So I got him busted pretty well. He ended up not getting anything from work comp, and I think they threatened him with jail time for fraud.
Okay.
I don't know if he went to jail or not, but
did that one have to go to court?
That one went to court too. And that was one of the ones that busted me because on the last day they wanted me to spot check the front of his house, and his driveway was probably a third of a mile long. So I had to get out of my van and go walk up on his driveway, and here he comes screaming up at me in a golf cart, and I had to run, get out of there, and just hightailed it out of there in my van.
Did you just not communicate with him, or did you?
I'd walk to where I could on a legal road. No, I didn't talk to him at all.
Okay.
I was just supposed to spot check him. So I walked. You're only allowed to go like 10 or 15 feet onto somebody's private property. Or you can be on public land wherever you want to be in filming. So I was in the adjacent property, and I walked where I could to see where that wasn't on his property to get a view of his house. And he must have saw me or heard me, and he comes screaming up at me in the golf cart. But luckily, I was able to scoot out of there before he caught me.
Did he know that you were an investigator at that time?
I don't think so. No.
Okay, but he saw you in court.
He knew that I was a trespasser and
Right.
recognized me in court. Yeah.
Okay. So then he didn't know about the video until he got to court, and he's
No, I had hours of him. Because I was just sitting out there. I got the world's. They had this shitty aluminum boat, and it was mid-July. It had to be 95 degrees, and I'm out there for some reason with my shirt off, and I'm in this aluminum boat. So the sun's beating down, but also reflecting back up at me. I'd never been so lobster sunburned in my life.
You can get you a workman's comp claim while you're investigating workman's comp.
I suppose. But yeah, I got the world's worst sunburn, but I'm sitting out there. I was up there for, like I said, 2 weeks fishing for almost every single day in his bay, and I got hours and hours and hours of footage of him doing stuff.
So what is the most common reaction first to, like, when they're sitting in court and then there's this video of them just totally blowing their case out of the water? Do they just kind of shrink in their seat? Is that?
Well, yeah, a little bit. I would say the woman, the bartender, had a look of like violation and then disgust.
That was because you're
I had to
interacting with her.
Yeah, I'm
right.
ordering food with her, and I chat people. I'm a pretty talkative person. I chat people.
Did you
up.
fuck her? You didn't fuck her.
No, I
did
didn't
you?
fuck her.
That would have been fucked up.
No, but she was hurt. It was she looked like I just kicked her cat or something. I don't know. She was she was upset. And I haven't been back to that bowling alley since.
All right. That's crazy. People drop their guard, man. They don't realize, how many people can be watching them and things like that. It's not a conscious thing. If it's not something that you're being alerted to look for, somebody looking at you or watching you, people are just oblivious most of the time.
And most bartenders try to be nice to their patrons because they like regulars, and that's how you get tips, Right, so, I mean,
exactly.
She was pretty chatty with me, and I'm the only one in there.
Oh, so did you tip her, and was your tips reimbursed?
Yes.
Nice. Did you tip her good at least? Did you at least
Yeah,
give her
I give 20%. And then I did see her after the case was done, before the court thing happened. My buddies, this is back in like 2000, I want to say 2005, and bar poker was pretty big back then.
Right.
And they did a bar poker night there, and I went up there, and she was hanging out, and I ended up sitting there and bullshitting with her for like an hour and a half, just hanging out. I wasn't there.
After
I was
the
like-
fact.
After the fact, but this is before court, so she still didn't know who I was or what I was
Oh,
doing.
okay. I was gonna say,
but it was just weird trying to, further this like alternative person that I'd created, because I wasn't an appraiser.
Right.
She's asked me, how's work? You didn't looked at any nice houses lately and blah blah. I was like, oh yeah, I forgot all about that lie I had to tell you,
Holy
because
shit.
I had to like create an alternate.
So that's a degree of acting and everything else and role playing and the whole thing.
It was weird. But yeah.
Holy shit. What kind of, because I guess we'll look at it as two different jobs. So as in the investigation part, what kind of experience did you need to get that job, if any? Did you learn as you went, or how did you get that job?
I kind of fell into that job. It was a little bit of nepotism, I would think. One of my best friends growing up is a kid named Andy Kennard, and I grew up in his house. He grew up in mine, and his dad was I don't know if he owns the business now, but back then he was a partner, and I was just looking to try something different. He asked me if I thought I could do this, and he put me on training with some of his seasoned guys for a couple of weeks, and I had a bit of a knack for it, and I just went out on my own and started doing it for him.
Okay.
So it was just like a family connection thing. I did have to go get licensed. You do have to pass a pretty difficult test, and you have to get licensed.
Is it a private investigator license?
Yes,
Is that
you
what
have to
it
have a
is?
license. You have to be you have to pass a BCA background check, and there's a very in-depth.
So no one of rapers out there
Yeah, they don't want
investigating
rapers.
people.
Yeah, there's a background check. There's all kinds of different licensing. There's a big, thick book. It's probably, I don't know, 1,200 pages of just the do's and don'ts. We're talking 12 years ago now when it comes to getting licensed, but I studied for about 3 weeks, and then I failed the test the first time and passed it the second time.
Okay. Is there any kind of rules, like as far as when you're doing an investigation, when you have to turn the camera off, like for something?
Well, you can't just sit there and film. Generally speaking, if there's no activity, you can only take like 10-second videos.
Oh, okay.
So I would do, like, when I pull up at
It's
a
like
place,
phone taps. Like they can listen to the phone tap for so long as if you're not talking about crime shit, they got to turn it off.
At least that's what they lead us to believe in the movies.
In the movies,
one
yeah.
of my buddies who I train jujitsu with is he's an undercover cop, and sometimes at the gym he'll be doing the way cops work overtime is they'll listen to like inmate phone calls.
Okay.
And he'll just be sitting there listening to him on his phone. But yeah, if you have reduced rights as an inmate, obviously, because you're an incarcerated
Hold on,
person.
wait. For extra work, they like people who are in jail on the phone.
Yeah.
That's how they listen to the phone calls. They just have cops listen on.
Yeah, cops.
No shit.
Off-duty cops will be like from 5:30 to 6:30, Monday through Friday. There's kids class, and he's got kids that are in the class. And while his kids are learning jujitsu, he'll be sitting there just listening to phone calls.
That's crazy. I never knew that's how it went
Yeah,
down.
off-duty cops. That's how they work overtime.
No
they'll
shit.
listen to. I mean, that's one of the ways. I'm sure that
Right.
they can moonlight security and do other things too. But one of the things that they do is listen to inmate phone calls.
Gotcha.
But the laws how it works is, and I asked him about this because I was interested. He said you have a minute and a half to listen on any given wiretap if there's no criminal activity being talked about, and then they have to tune out for 2 minutes, and then they can tap back in.
Okay.
So you would see that in some movies, like I think Casino is a good example.
That's exactly
of it.
what I'm thinking of.
He would have the wives chat for like a minute.
Or was it
and a half,
Goodfellas? Might have been
One
good.
or the other.
Either one. Same movie.
Yeah, same movie.
Pretty much.
And then they would talk business for 30 seconds and then get the gals back on. That's a legit thing, but inmates have reduced rights. So, but when it comes to private investigator, if there's no activity, I can't just be sitting there filming your house.
Okay.
You have to be doing something.
Okay. Gotcha. So it wasn't really any kind of train. What about pay for that job, for the investigating job? What were you making beyond your expenses and all that?
Like I said, it was mileage. So mileage is an industry standard. It's a state regulated thing. I think it's 58 cents a mile.
No shit.
So,
Nice.
and like I said, if you're traveling more than 100 miles, you do get paid for those miles, but then you're also not round tripping that. So if I have to go 140 miles to where I'm going, that's what I'm getting that day plus my hourly. And I mean, when I started, I think it was 15 or $16 an hour plus mileage. But then by the time I left, it was significantly more than that because I was producing and coming up with good footage. I think you're rewarded based on, your production.
Gotcha. So what about on the investigation side of the stories? You told me the one about the footage in the bar. Do you have any other stories specifically about either weird or interesting investigations that you did?
Yeah, I was telling you a little bit about this earlier. I had to track and follow somebody in a very public setting, and it was super awkward. I was following a guy from St. Cloud. I didn't know what he was going to do. I never know what they're going to do. I show up, and it's 6 a.m. usually when I get there, sometimes 5 a.m., and I sit there, and then the lights come on, and I take a snap of that, or if they come out and get the mail or do whatever they do. Well, this was at the end of the summer, and he ended up going from St. Cloud to the state fair. Okay. So I had to follow him, and that's a long way to follow somebody too. We're talking, a good hour, 35 minutes plus. When you get into the denser traffic, it's pretty tough to tail somebody. And then
finding parking.
Finding parking. Yeah,
that's gonna be the hardest part.
But luckily, I was able to get there. Followed him all the way to the state fair, and this guy had supposedly back and neck restrictions. Wasn't supposed to be twisting, turning, bending, things like that. It's very common. I don't know if he had whiplash or whatever the case may be. I never really know.
So let me guess, he jumped on the roller coaster first thing.
Not first thing, but yes, he definitely did make his way into the midway. But
why would you, if you're hiding from the insurance or trying to scam the insurance, why would you go to the great Minnesota get together where everybody's at, including insurance investigators?
People are so oblivious.
That's what I'm saying. They don't care. They don't get it.
You would be surprised at how often you can be followed. And there's hundreds of investigators out there working every single day. And you would never notice that you're being followed because what are we trained to look for? I mean, we're talking 10 years ago, we're looking for Caprice Classics. We're looking for... What was the other? What was the Ford?
Ford LTD.
Yeah, the LTDs. Yeah, but no, that shape
Victorias
isn't there anymore. Now we're looking for SUVs and the Dodge Chargers. I think are what the cops are driving now. But we're trained to look for those specific things. But you're never going to think anything of a white or silver or tan minivan that's following you because how many soccer? And I had a soccer mom sticker on my back window. I didn't have kids at the time, but you'd try to look innocuous and blend in, so you'd never notice that type of stuff's going on. And even if you'd feel like you are being followed, like I would get to know these people that I'm following because I wouldn't just be out there following them for one day. I'd be out there following them for a couple weeks. So if they were going to the gym, I would just let them go and I would just be a mile behind and I'd go to the gym. But in places like this where I didn't know where he was going, then you have to follow a little closer. But on the highway, how often do you really look in your rearview mirror? And if you're not seeing that Ford LTD, if you're not seeing that Caprice Classic, you're not, you don't care about the tan van.
Right. Just goes out of there.
And you always try to follow on a straightaway. You try to follow about a quarter mile behind, and you try to keep 2 or 3 cars behind or between you. They're never going to notice that you're following them, and people are oblivious.
Right.
And even worse today, because everybody's on their fucking cell phones.
Yeah, everybody's distracted beyond anyway. You don't even have to hide from them anymore. What was I going to ask? I don't know. I forgot that. Well, let's talk about what you're doing now.
Yeah.
And you're essentially just an insurance agent, right?
Yep. I'm a commercial lines producer. It's a lofty title for sales guy. Basically, my job is to interact with my vertical, which is contractors, construction companies, and I do a lot of different vendors. I write a few school buses, things like that. But my day-to-day, sometimes I go into the office for a couple hours and I might reach out via email or make some phone calls and try to schedule a meeting to introduce myself and our process of how we approach the insurance marketplace on your behalf, or find out what value-add services your current agent is implementing in your program. And you'd be surprised, most people aren't getting anything, return on investment for their insurance. Basically, there's 2 ways you can pay an agent. You can either have commissions that are built into the premiums that you pay, which is the most traditional way, or you can have commissions pulled out and pay your agent a flat fee. It's a little less common, but as a business owner, it might be something that you'd be interested in. Here's why. It's because certain carriers, be it your EMC or Cincinnati or Travelers, Acuity, any of the major commercial insurance lines, Berkeley, they pay different rates for commission. So your agent might keep you with a company specifically because they get 20% from these guys, whereas if they shopped and saved you 5% and put it over here, they'd be cutting their own throats. So a good way to look at it, and the way that I like to do it, is to remove that conflict of interest. That way, when I'm servicing my clients, I remove that, and that way I don't have to cut my own throat. I'd rather just put a percentage based on what you're paying into a fee. That way it doesn't really matter who your carrier is. But that's the way to go about it. But my day-to-day is going to association meetings, playing golf with business owners, buying people lunch.
Again, these are expenses for you, or these?
We do get an allotted amount of expense. I have an expense account that I can use. Okay. But a lot of times I try to make friends with these people and hang out with them. So it's, I'll buy my buddies a beer.
Right.
It's not a big deal. But yeah, if it's a big thing, like if I'm going to go pay $250 for us to go play at a golf event, yeah, the company's picking up that tab. I ain't picking up that tab.
Gotcha. So how long in between doing the investigation work, which was mostly working for insurance companies, to doing this job? How long of a gap in between?
There's about 9 years.
9 years.
I was a private investigator, and then I got married, and I had kids, and I couldn't be gone as much. It's like I said, you're on the road. I mean, I could be in Nebraska, almost at no notice. I could be in my home in Blaine at the time, and now tomorrow morning I have to be in Fargo, and I won't see you for 2 weeks. That life isn't very conducive to being a parent and being a married person. So I changed jobs. I started working for, at the time it was Allied Interstate, as a bill collector for the U.S. Department of Education. And I did that for about 7 years. And then I transferred to ECMC, which is the same contract, United States Student Loan Debt. And I maintained there for another 2 years. And then what happened is presidential and legislation changed the ability for a third party to collect on federal debt. So the commission structure just plummeted. I went from being like $180,000 a year employee, which is a hell of a salary for a collector, to collecting the same dollar amount but being paid like 70 grand. So I needed a change.
More than half.
Yeah, way more than half. And my best friend, Matt Schneider, who I trained jiu-jitsu with, who got me started training, told me that I would kill it in this field. I have a background in sales from before too. And I went and took the steps to go get licensed, which I went to Kaplan University, it's like a 40-hour program. That's 20 hours per line. Typical agents can have.
Is there an education requirement?
There is. Yeah, you have to get a certification from. You can do it. You can do it online. You can do it at home, but you do have to have the minimum hours are required. It's 40 hours.
Well, I mean, you don't have to have do you have to have a college degree?
No, you don't have to have a college degree. No, and
you just need the training.
I don't think anybody in the class had one. Maybe they did. I doubt it though. But. And that also stands to the washout rate too, because I'd say I'm pretty sure it's something like 70% of people who attempt to become an insurance agent wash out in the first 2 years. Because
is that difficulty of training, or is that
it's such a vast industry. There's so many different avenues to know about. Insurance has so many different loopholes. Why things won't get paid, why they don't get paid, why they should get paid, why are premiums the way that they are, why. There's so many different avenues. There's work comp, there's auto, and there's 40 different ways that you can write auto. There's hundreds of different class codes on what type of an employee you have, and you physically can't know all of them. You need to find a niche focus and something that you have a background in. Like I worked construction, and I know my way around a hammer. I know the footfalls, the trips, slips, and falls. I understand the hazards, so I can talk to a blue collar guy, and we can connect on a level, and I can explain to him what we can do to improve what's going on, how we can showcase what you're already doing in the best light, and I understand how to sell that to someone of that ilk, because I have that. But if you don't have some sort of specific training in some other area, you can't walk into a bank, because banks have to buy insurance too. Doctors have to buy insurance. Medical, in-home living, assisted living.
Everything needs insurance.
Everything needs insurance. And if you don't have some expertise in what you're doing. And from working in a work comp investigation claim, especially with manufacturing and contractors, which was mainly where these injuries and claims come from, because they're high risk environments. I know how the claims happen. I know how the people that are filing the claims react. I know how the back end works because I worked in that area, so I understand it and I can explain it to a business owner. We can come to common ground and we can see value in each other.
Right.
So that's why I've been pretty successful with what I'm doing. But I forgot what I was talking about. Oh, but there's people that don't come in and they go to these classes and they don't have a degree. A degree would help. I mean, it definitely makes you more well-spoken, more well-rounded. You might understand business and finance and marketing, which is all part of what I do.
Right.
But it's really your agent's job is to create relationships. I need a relationship with the carriers. I need to create relationships with prospects, and I need to merge those two things for mutual benefit.
And that has a lot to do with the product itself, because everybody needs to have the insurance. They're going to get it regardless. So then it just becomes a point of you selling yourself really at that point, because
Sure.
do they want to deal with you or the 12 other guys who are trying, or gals that are trying to
Absolutely.
sell the same thing?
Well, and you can buy, there's all kinds of different loopholes for insurance. Like you can have $1 million building. I'll use $1 million because it's a nice round number. Everybody can get their head around.
It's one of my favorite numbers.
Sure. But you can insure that building for $800,000 and just have an 80% co-insurance. But then if you have an actual loss to that building, let's say the whole thing burns down, you don't have $1 million of insurance. You're already going to be $200K out of pocket to replace that building.
Right.
Because you have a co-insurance clause. So it's my job to understand my client's risk tolerance. Like, if you actually have this loss, how much can you afford to pay out of pocket? Would you rather be paying more in premium, or would you rather be paying more in a deductible in the event of a loss? And having that conversation is really what drives the industry. And some people aren't comfortable having that conversation, and they typically will wash out.
Are there, you're talking about the agents themselves being uncomfortable. So keep staying on that part right there. How often when you're dealing with a client, do they misunderstand, where their risk is at, and whatever there is that you're trying to sell them insurance for, they don't understand the actual values? Does that happen a lot? Are you doing a lot of education oftentimes? And
in the intro meetings, yeah. I mean, we talk a little bit about our approach to it. But I'll be honest with you, most insurance guys just have a buddy from high school that did it, and that's the only thing that they know. They trust their buddy. They go drinking on the weekends, or they go golfing, or he chips in and help their kid when they needed a fundraiser. It's all relationship driven.
Right.
So trying to have this I sell an intangible product.
right.
So it's really, the main thing is to just be present, and then when they have a question, answer it. And that's the other thing too, is like me as an agent, I have to carry errors and omission insurance, because if I lie to you, I can get sued for up to $250,000 for giving you bad advice. And that's, my license is on the line every single day. And if
Has anybody ever tried to sue you?
Not yet, but
sure,
it happens
okay.
all the time.
Really?
The deductible for that on a my pocket would be $25,000 before
Jesus.
insurance would even kick in. So that's why you're going to see a lot of agents that refuse to answer questions or say, "Oh, I'll get back to you." You're going to get a lot of that because they don't know, or B, are afraid to get.
They just want to make sure they know what they think they know and confirm it and all that.
Absolutely. So my job is really just to look at your current policy and then ask questions about it, because there's no such thing as a boilerplate policy. It could be Jeff's roofing company and Joey's roofing company, and the way that you have everything structured could be apples and oranges to what I have. And everybody that wants this bid say, "Well, I want an apples to apples opinion." Well, if I come in and you show me a rotten apple, I'm not going to show you another one.
Right.
I don't really care about the price that you're paying. That doesn't matter to me. I'm sure at the end of the day it matters to you. But if I sell you an insurance and then you have a claim that you're not covered for, that can fall back on my responsibility, and I'm not going to set you up to have a shitty policy.
Right.
That's where the nuts and bolts of it is.
I feel like I sidetracked you a little bit on the training part, and I know we covered about the 40 hours of training and all that.
Yeah, I can get
Is there
back
anything
to that.
else on that as far as?
So to become an insurance agent in Minnesota, and you can be licensed. Once you're licensed in any state in the union, you can basically just pay a fee to be licensed in other states. So basically you just have to go through whatever your state's regulation. So in Minnesota,
So the training is pretty much universal.
it's
state to state.
universal,
Okay.
but you pay a fee. Like, let's say I'm licensed in 47 states right now. But in Minnesota, there's 20 hours minimum training per line. There's 4 lines available to any insurance agent or prospective agent. There's property and casualty. That's P&C. So that's going to be everything from your buildings and autos. Casualty, those are your liabilities.
Property is private and business property together.
For both, yeah.
Okay.
Even though I focus on commercial insurance, I'm still licensed. I could sell you your car insurance if you wanted me to. I don't want to. I don't want to deal with that. I don't want to be your bill collector, but I could.
Right.
And then there's life and health. And then there's other like add-ons that you can get, like 401k, and you can be SE7 certified and things like that. But for basic insurance agents, most of them are licensed for 2 or 4 lines. I focus on property and casualty because it's really where most of the claims come from, and it's where most of the premium comes from. And I don't want to be involved with the reason you hate your boss, because almost everybody hates their boss because health insurance has gone to shit.
Right.
And most people don't like their agent. And we're seeing a lot of changes in that. That's probably the most common meeting that's accepted right now is, hey, can we look at your health insurance? Which could create opportunity, but it also creates a lot of headache, and I'd rather stay away from it.
Right.
But for licensing, you have to do your 20 hours per line, and then there's a test per line too. And the test is 144 questions, and you have to have an 80% pass rate.
Okay.
And there is no...
So a B.
You have to get a B. There's no grading. It's just pass fail. So
Right.
if your agent tells you that they got 93% or 99% on their test, they're full of shit because they don't know. It's pass or fail. But you just have to do better than 80, otherwise you don't pass.
Is this like an open book thing? Is this
The state testing facilities now are all done online. You basically log into a computer at a approved facility. I went to the one in Eden Prairie, and they take everything out of your pockets. You can't even have your ID on you. They
Really?
You're completely tabbed. You're allowed to have a pencil and a piece of paper, and then you're at a computer. So if you want to, while you're in there, when you're going to training, there's all kinds of acronyms that they teach you that help you learn things like WC shavers and the big effect. I'm not going to go into what those mean, but they
Right.
like wind, hail, fire, and things like that. Or
Gotcha.
they teach you these acronyms because they supposedly help you. They didn't. I didn't remember them by the time I got there, but they teach you them. And the classes aren't really teaching you how to be an insurance agent. They're teaching you how to pass this test.
okay?
So you go in and you get licensed, and sometimes your company would pay for this. I paid out of pocket. The class was like $500. The test was $150, and then you have to pay an additional $100 for your license, and then you have to continue to pay for continuing education as you progress. Every 2 years, you have to have 24 hours, unless you
How many years?
every 2 years.
Every 2 years.
Every 2 years, you have to have 24 hours of continuing education. Other professional licenses are similar for like real estate and mortgage brokers, things. People that are professional license, they have to maintain. CPAs have to maintain continuing education. mandatory
Is
minimums.
insurance law and rules, it's almost fluid now, right? Because I mean, it changes
Yeah, it changes all the time.
all the time. Not only with new products or new things that need to be insured and to understand, but
And the
just
way
legal changes, I guess.
Claims drive the market. So a good instance of what's going on right now, especially in transportation, is distracted driving. So
Yeah.
everybody knows Minnesota's got the no cell phone rule. I don't remember what it's called specifically, but you can get a distracted driving ticket, and it's like $100 if you, because they basically say if you're texting and driving, it's almost as bad as you being drunk driving. Well, now commercial insurance carriers are looking to remove you and disqualify you from being on a commercial insurance policy if you get that ticket, because it's just like if you get a D-dub. And
Yeah, I remember my last job was working for a delivery company, and it was like something like a $50,000 fine if I was to be caught even touching we couldn't even touch our phones. This was before the hands-free law.
Yeah, that's
was
what the
enacted here.
hands-free law is what
Yeah.
it is. So they're I had the word in my head before I started talking about it, but it's not in effect yet, but it will be very soon. So your bus drivers, your truckers, and those people have to communicate. You see, I don't know how many times I see a trucker on the road with a headset. And
Right.
So if you're hands-free and you're Bluetooth, you're okay. But Uber drivers, and they all have those things mounted on there. You can't have that anymore. It's got to be below the dash. So, and those people are going to be removed from commercial.
But you can't have the window mounted thing anymore?
It's got to be below the dash line. It's got to be below eye level.
No shit.
Yeah.
Seems like to me that's more dangerous if I have to look down to see my GPS versus, catching it in my line of sight as I'm looking out the windshield.
Yeah, but you'd be surprised at people driving down the road that are just sitting there watching YouTube videos or whatever.
Oh, I've seen it.
Yeah,
It just blows my mind. It's like you get behind somebody and they're watching porn on their fucking. They're like, what are you doing?
Give it to her, Sam.
What's the conversation right now going on within the industry about self-driving cars? Is there a lot of talk about the insurance parameters of that?
It's so hard to insure. Who's at fault?
Right.
Is it the manufacturer? Is it the last mechanic that worked on the vehicle? Is it the company itself? Is it? I don't know how they're going to insure it. That's one of the hot topics. The other thing that's probably the biggest hot topic, especially in my vertical, because it's becoming more prevalent in different states, is marijuana in the contractor's workplace.
Oh yeah.
Right now, it's the state that where your business is located in that is the governing factor. And Minnesota is the most stringent state when it comes to drug testing policies, and it's in favor of the employee, which is weird. So
In favor, how?
Well, let's say that if you want to come work for me and I don't have a drug testing policy in place, and you fall off a roof, and again, just using contractors for ease, you fall off the roof and I say I want to test you.
Roofers love to smoke weed too.
They definitely do. Yeah. If you fall off the roof and get hurt and I want to drug test you because say you were high, it's your fault. You fell off the roof, not my problem. Right. If I didn't test you in Minnesota, if my policy wasn't to test you before you got hired, I can't test you after the accident either.
Oh, okay.
And even if I do test you, if I do have a policy that I make you pee in a cup and you pass before you get hired, and then you fail after you get hired and you have a claim, I can't fire you because I'm required to give you, at your own expense, to go to treatment, and then you'd have to follow up with subsequent testing, and I can test you for up to 6 months. But even if you pop out again, I still can't fire you.
Okay.
And let's say you're a medical marijuana patient, which now we have that here in Minnesota. You're basically automatically going to fail because you're a card-carrying member that says, hey, I have this issue, PTSD, Crohn's disease, whatever the case may be, and I'm a medical marijuana patient. Well, I can't fire you because you're going to pop hot. And if I try to fire you because you're a medical marijuana user, then you can sue me because you're considered a protected class of citizen, being that you're disabled. So that's where all the lawsuits are coming from in Minnesota. Now, even
what a glorious future that weed smokers are a protected class now.
That's true.
God damn,
that's
beautiful.
Let's say I'm a major contractor, a general contractor, and I'm doing work in other states like Colorado,
right,
and it's legal there. Well, you can smoke it not only medically but recreationally over there, and if you get hurt on the job, they still and they have different laws over there. Like, they could fire you, and they don't have to provide you treatment or none of that. But because your home office brick and mortar is here, any employee under my banner has to follow my difficult rules.
Oh, whoa, that sucks for them.
Yeah, so it's all about job description, and people their lawsuits are stemming from the job description, and people that are already in this position that go out and get their medical marijuana card are essentially getting a medical marijuana card and writing themselves out of a job, because in the job description, if it says safety sensitive, which means if you can put yourself at risk or others at risk, you're automatically disqualified from that position if you're a medical marijuana person, and that's the only way around that law in Minnesota right now.
Holy shit. So to get insured to ride around in your Tesla on autopilot smoking weed is really difficult.
Yeah.
It's going to be a pain in the ass.
Yeah, I don't know where that would come from. That's interesting. I hadn't thought about that, but we're going to have to.
Right.
Because there's already some trucks in like California that are 100% automated. I don't know what their routes are if they're on closed roads, but somebody's going to have to be at fault. Is it the camera company that's filming it? I don't know.
Yeah, the specific technology that makes it. Yeah, holy shit.
I don't know.
That's the thing, is as technology advances, there's all these new products are going to come out, and everything is going to need insurance. So if we get teleportation machines, they're going to need to be insured. There's going to be.
Speaking of technology, that's where the claims are coming from right now, is cyber, and you'd be shocked to find out that.
What do you mean?
Cyber claims are the most frequent claims in insurance in the world right now. Cyber security, not people like getting hacked like Target, but cyber insurance isn't just your computer or your firewall. It could be Betty's list of passwords she's got sitting on her desk. Somebody comes by, takes a snap, and then accesses it from somewhere else, sells credit card information, proprietary information. That's where all the claims
Oh,
are coming from.
you're insuring the risk of loss related to identity theft or anything digital.
But it's not just digital. It could be your file cabinet. Like if you have, if you're an old school mom and pop shop, I worked for a company called American Pressure. They deal in pressure washers, parts cleaners, all things to do with high wire pressure. They sell everything. But the way that they do their storage system and their filing system is very archaic. They have rooms that are the size of this house that are filled with different file cabinets, and every single client's got little 3x5 note cards of everything they've ever bought. So let's say they have order files on, or they have orders on file, and they have old credit cards or any type of information. If I came in and I swiped a bunch of those, that's considered a cyber risk too, because it's data. Even though it's not in the computer, it's still data. So it could be passwords, it could be your Visa swipe machine, it could be someone stealing your cell phone and getting a hold of a bunch of numbers and exploiting that. Jeez. It could be anything. It doesn't have to be, it can be physical. It doesn't have to be intangible, like, me using malware or ransomware. So if you open up an email that says, buy this order, and you send $30,000 to the wrong company because you got a directive from what looked like your boss to make a purchase. Right. It doesn't have to be that. It can be anything.
So what is the average, like a large company, like say like a Target or something, or what kind of policy are they carrying, and like how much protection do they need for things like identity theft or issues like that?
They need billions in coverage. I mean, they're dealing with, I think their average day is they have hundreds of millions of dollars in transactions every single day.
Right.
So, and it happened twice in the last 2 years where their Target Red cards with the chips in them,
right,
those things got hacked, and people were stealing money directly from their bank account. And because that's a Target product that they use to give you a 5% discount at their store, but it still contains your bank information. I mean, my wife's Target card got hacked.
I mean, and they're completely liable. It's all on them, right?
They're completely liable, but insurance companies paid for that. I mean, they probably paid a massive deductible, which was, I would say, 10% of whatever the actual loss was. But yeah. And then because of that claim, their premiums go up. And because they're not a monopolistic, they're not the only one that bought that program. Anybody else that had that type of insurance, their premiums went up. That's all insurance is a transfer of risk.
Right.
Transferring risk of one party to many. So let's say, like, for a good example, we have hailstorms here every summer.
Right.
Your house didn't get hit, but 4 blocks that way, they got smoked. Your insurance is going to go up whether or not you get a new roof or not, because you're in that grid.
Right.
It's likely that you have State Farm along with 17% of the people that live over there, or if you have Allstate or whatever. Because
when there's changes like that, it doesn't just go within the company; it's within all the companies.
It's within the region. Yeah.
Right.
It's calculable and measurable, and
because they're using that history to determine what risk factors are, and it's
absolutely
they all read out of the same
book.
book.
They're not just pulling numbers out of hats. And auto is the highest and worst. What's the word that I'm looking for? The return, the profit and loss on auto insurance is the worst it's ever been. Loss ratio is the worst it's ever been. Insurance companies write out a policy. Let's say again, $1 million. You have $1 million property policy or a work comp policy, and you're paying $1 million in premium. They're assuming that throughout the year you're going to have $500,000 in claims. So they're looking for a 50% return on their investment. So if you do better than that, you can get discounts and credits. But if you do worse than that, your premiums are going to go up. Same thing with auto. So let's say if you're paying $1 million in auto right now for premiums, it's 111% loss ratio is the national average. So on every $1 million that they're bringing in, they're paying out $111 million.
Wow.
And that's why auto premiums keep going up. It's the hardest market in all of commercial insurance.
What is specifically about the auto insurance? What is affecting that change? Why is it the texting?
It's texting and driving.
Get the fuck out.
It's texting and driving, and it's also some states legally. I mean, I'd rather smoke and fly than drink and drive personally. I mean, I'm doing the Sober October thing, but people that smoke are, especially in states where it's legal now, there's more accidents, and they're coming out with the breathalyzer for weed, and it's going to be released in January. So I mean, they're cracking down on that. But that's the main factor. It's more people are intoxicated on the road, and everybody's texting and driving. I don't think I've ever seen a 15-year-old kid without a cell phone in their hand.
Yeah, no shot. Or younger.
You can't even have a conversation with them anymore. They're just living in there.
Right. I'm sure the answer is going to be it's very less than what you're talking about, distracted driving or whatever, things like that. But is there anything about cost of vehicles? Because like nowadays, like a modern vehicle, a lot more electronics in it, a lot more things. Like if you're in an accident, a lot more expensive stuff to repair in it because they're just so more high tech. Is that as much of a factor, or
it can be because there's different ways that you can write your insurance, your policy based on. Let's say that you drive a BMW and it's $70,000.
Right.
You have a nice car. If you drive a policy and your car is actual cash value, you're going to be paying less in premium than if you're paying based on replacement cost. Right. Because the moment you drive a brand new car off the lot, it drops 10% in value. So now we're talking about a $63,000 car versus a $70,000 car. Oh, but if you have it at replacement cost, what it's going to cost to give you the exact same thing, you're going to be paying more in premium. Or if it's agreed value, let's say we agree that this car is worth $50,000. And that's what we'll pay if it's totaled.
Right.
So there's 3 different ways that you can write it based on agreed value, replacement cost, or actual cash value. Okay. So most people's personal belongings, let's say you are a clothing connoisseur and every single piece of your clothing was bought at, fine tailoring, and you have $1,000 suits and you have 50 of them upstairs. Well, if your homeowner's policy is written on actual cash value, they're going to give you a cost per pound on what your clothing is worth.
Per pound?
Per pound.
Really?
They don't care if it's silk or if it's cotton or if it's linen, or they don't care. But if it's written on agreed value, yes, we agree that you have $75,000 worth of clothes, or replacement cost, even better, because prices have gone up, textiles, things like that, for replacement cost. It just depends. So it depends on how you write your policy, and that's the things that you have to talk about with business owners. Is your building? Because if you have $100,000 or 100-year-old building, which a lot of these older buildings in like Isani and outstate cities have older construction, these buildings you can't write them on a replacement cost because they don't make things that way anymore.
Right.
They need to either be on an agreed value or they need to be on an actual cash value, and you have to caution people against actual cash value because if it costs, this building is $4 million. But we can put it back up in 3.2, that's what you're going to get. Right. So that's the conversation when I'm talking about risk tolerance. Those are the conversations that real agents need to be having with their business owners versus, sure, yeah, my building's insured for $2 million. Yeah, but how's it worded? There's no 2 policies that are written the same.
Okay. Asking for a friend.
Sure.
How hard is it to defraud an insurance company if your house burns down and you're like, oh, I had a bunch of, very valuable paintings or whatever that got burned up.
It's all about what you can prove.
Right.
So if you have receipts for things, it's a great way to prove it. But if they were burned up in the house, if you don't have a fire safe,
right,
then it may be very difficult to prove. If you have, for homeowners, jewelry and guns and things like that, they're all set limits. So you might have 50 guns here. But you're only going to get 2,000 or 2,500.
52.
52 guns. Okay, yeah. I guessed. That's close. But if you have 52 guns here, there's a set amount that's in your homeowner's policy that's going to say, on most standard policies that are special form, which is I'm assuming you have a decent form, it's probably going to pay $2,500 for those guns, all of them.
Really?
But if you have receipts and you have personal property written on a separate line for your property, which you can do and it's not expensive to do, or photos and you can prove that these things exist, and I would typically, that's what safe deposit boxes are for. They're not really for cash, and that's not what they're for. They're for images and receipts and things that you keep off site at a bank.
Okay.
Then you'd have a better claim, but otherwise you're going to get weight.
What areas of insurance is fraud the most frequent and easiest for the person committing the fraud to get away with?
Insurance fraud, the easiest way to get away with it.
That's probably a subjective question.
Yeah, it's pretty subjective. I would think Monetary.
I was going to say, I thought injury is the most, probably the most common, right?
Those they come up with the most astronomical claims on, like, let's say I'm a 20-year-old person and I've been in the workforce for 2 years and I'm permanently disabled.
Right.
Whether or not you are or not, you're going to claim that you're permanently disabled. And let's say that my life expectancy would have generated $750,000. So that's the claim that I'm putting in. Then the insurance company is going to do everything that they can to disprove your claim, which is where a private investigator would come in, because they'd rather pay them $2,500 a week or whatever it is, maybe even $10,000 a week for 2-3 weeks to go get footage of you doing what you're doing so they can disprove and reduce that. So, but yeah, I would say that work comp is probably the most common, or a death claim. We see several death claims every single year, especially in highway heavy construction. A lot of guys like flag holders, just see them out there with the slow down sign. Apparently people aren't reading those, but those people get mowed down a lot.
Really?
Yeah, that happens a lot. It's one of the most common ways people die.
No shit.
In excavation companies, if they are digging decent holes and they're working multiple, I mean, not saying that this is common, but it does happen. If you're digging a big hole or digging several holes and you're not properly marking and you're leaving for the day, pedestrians might wander into a job site and fall into holes. That happens all the time. Steel riggers, erectors, things like that, falling from heights, that happens quite a bit too.
Oh,
so
shit.
Then you have to deal with what was this person making, what's their projected lifespan. But honestly, a lot of times it's cheaper to kill them, because if they're going to be disabled, not only are you paying the pain and suffering, but you're also paying the medical
ongoing
bills
treatment
and
things
ongoing
like that as well.
treatment. Yeah.
How does an insurance company, how do they determine the value of a human life, and are all human lives equal in value?
Absolutely not.
Okay,
It's
explain that to me.
Based on previous, I mean, it's all drawn on from prior cases. I mean, all court proceedings, like, let's talk about the $5 million hot coffee at McDonald's.
Right.
Versus if they did that today, you might get $20,000. The lawsuits drive the market. Once precedence has been set, they're going to follow suit until something has gone to driven that price down. Like we used to see.
Well, if they just staying with your example, because
well, now there's caution hot on all the cups, and they're not going to be sued because the liability.
Because the liability has been minimized.
Yeah.
By them putting the cautions that weren't on there prior.
Yeah.
Okay, now I get what you're saying. I was going to
So
say, if it's the same injury,
like slip and falls. Like I had a friend's mom that slip and fell and blew her knee out at a restaurant, and she ended up suing for like a couple $100,000 because they didn't have that caution wet floor out. Well, you can still have that same injury might come and that sign might be there, but there's policies that are now in place, and this is common for like convenience stores and restaurants. It's just called MedPay. Mm-hmm. It's usually like a $10,000 or $25,000 kitty that they have built into their policy, where they'll just pay that and there won't be a claim at all.
right?
So
They figure the cost of just settling is less than the cost of fighting the claim.
absolutely.
But if they see the potential of it being a bigger reward or more medical treatments or more whatever.
General liability is driven by payroll and your exposure to the public. So let's say if you have a gas station, you have all kinds of exposure to the public, and you're required to keep and maintain proper walkways, especially in the winter here in Minnesota. Slips and falls happen all the time. But if I have like a standalone delivery-only Pizza Hut, my general liability is far less. So the med pay there will be different. It's all calculated based on previous claims.
Okay.
So past experience is what drives the market. They're not anticipating. They're learning from what's happened and adapting that way.
So I guess what I was asking, as far as the value of a human life, if say somebody walking by a construction site, a steel beam falls and crushes and kills somebody. If it crushes and kills a homeless man who
has no prospects,
something like that, versus it falls on like the CEO of a bank who's making multi-million-dollars a year, is the payout going to be the same, or is it going to be different based on their?
I think it's based. I can't say for sure, but my estimation of how I perceive that to go, it's based on what they were making, what they have,
The potential to make.
the potential earnings. It also has to do with age. Like if you're an 80-year-old man walking down the street and you get hit by a steel girder and it kills you, you might have. I mean, you've already outlived the life expectancy of a male. So that payout's going to be significantly less than if you're a 5-year-old child that gets hit by that same beam. So, I mean, it's all calculable, but I guess I don't really know. It would really have to be based on how good your attorney was, too. Because, I mean, if that happened, you're going to not only sue the building that was being worked on, but there's probably, in any erection of a building, there's probably 10 or 15, maybe 20 different contractors that all have certificates of insurance to operate on that building.
Right.
Because there's the electrician, there's the tenants of the building. They all have to be listed as certified insurance. So let's say if you're working in a hotel, they have a Starbucks, they have a gift shop, they have a dry cleaner, because a lot of hotels will have those. And then there's the maintenance people, there's the service people, and they're putting a pool out back, and they have an excavation company, they have a landscaper, they have an interior designer, an engineer, an architect. Every single one of those companies could be named in a lawsuit.
No shit.
Because they all have insurance on that property, depending on where and when that happened.
Right.
So anybody that's involved can be listed, and typically it trickles down to the lowest rung, the lowest tier contractor. So even if they had nothing to do with it, almost all certificates of insurance flow down. The big major GCs are typically the highest protected, and they have the most insurance and they have the most money, but they pass the buck down and down and down and down, and you might get the scaffolding company. That might be the company that has the lowest stake in it, and their insurance policy might only be for $1 million, and that might be the most that you can get. So it's all based on that.
Gotcha. I want to end on doing some of the claim stories that you got, but one question I asked about when you're doing the investigation work, about what's the profit potential doing that, but where you're at now are you an average insurance agent? I mean, is there any specialty to what you're doing or anything? Or just trying to figure out how valuable the job is.
I work with some people in my office that are millionaires.
Okay.
I work with
that are agents that are millionaires.
Yes.
Holy shit.
Well, insurance income is residual. Right. So as long as you maintain your clients,
right? As long as they keep re-signing that policy, you're going to cut off
every time. Well, and again, it's either fee based or it's commission based. So if it's commission based, you're paid monthly. If it's fee based, you're paid when they sign and they cut a check. But let's say I have 20 clients and they're all $20,000 in revenue apiece. That's $400,000. The company obviously makes a nice chunk off the top, and then your agent makes typically somewhere between 20 and 40%, depending on your contract with your agency.
Really, that much? Okay.
Of what not the premium. A $20,000 premium.
Okay, gotcha.
A $20,000 revenue account is probably somebody that's paying $200,000 in premium. So typically it's about 10% if we're talking commission based only.
Right.
So we have some guys that have been in our office that have been doing it for 60 years, and they have books of business that are $2-3 million in revenue, and they make 30-40% of that, and they can make $1 million a year. There's guys like that. There's guys in my position who have a few $100,000 in their book. I still draw a salary, which sorry, he's not going to disclose it. But I draw a salary in addition to commission, but eventually I will move to a solely commission based operation. You also can get paid for referral. You can get paid for our agency. Assured Partners is the 5th largest brokerage in the country. So we are always, our business model is to acquire other successful agents as well as producing our own clients from within. But if I was to say refer Joey's commercial insurance agency and we bought your agency, I could get up to $125,000 for acquiring your agency, and that would be a one-time thing. But there's all kinds of different ways to make money in our industry.
Wow!
And with contractors, especially that deal with anything on a civil or a federal job, they're required to have certain bonds in place, and those are all paid out at a percentage. They're typically one-time things, but I do a lot of bonding work because I had people working on Allianz Field. I had people working at Target Field. I had people working, and they're required to have multi-million-dollar bonds while their projects are going on, and you get a percentage of that. So I do very well. Not as well as I did as a collector yet, but I will get there. I'm up and coming.
So ideally is to get into insurance as soon as possible in your career.
Yeah, but
because
again,
you're stacking those returns.
But again, 70% of people that try fail.
Right.
And the other one, I mean, the health insurance is different. It's based on the life. So let's say if you write insurance for a 10-person group, that might be $4,000 a year in revenue. Depending on what lines they offer, if they just do basic health or if they offer dental, vision, any ancillary lines, short-term disability, 401k, that type of stuff. 401k is typically 1% of every dollar that goes into 401k comes to the agent, and that's a residual thing. So we have some people that specialize in that, and they have multi-million-dollar clients that, that all they do is restructure and benchmark 401ks and help people save and finance.
Right.
Yeah, so it just depends. I mean, but some people, there's people within my company that I don't work with, but they're at other locations because there's like, I think 142 in the U.S. But there's people that have $20-30 million books that are making $5-10 million a year doing what I do.
Holy shit! If a couple more questions, we'll go to those last stories. What if you could only pick one area of insurance to sell, to be an agent for, is there one that's more profitable for the agent than any other? Is there
401k is probably no one looks at it. They set it and forget it because nobody wants to mess with it. You need to have an SE7 license for that. But that's probably the most lucrative if you were going to be an agent, if you wanted to focus on one niche thing. But again, you would probably want a financing degree to go along with that.
Well, how does that, I don't understand the connection between insurance and 401k. I guess I don't understand that.
Well, 401k is an ancillary coverage that it's an insurance that your work pays for you. It's a giant trust fund basically that's spread out over, usually groups of 25 or more, but there's some companies out there like 3M would be like the biggest whale in Minnesota that I can think of,
right,
where they have, 25,000 employees and every single one of them gets drops in their bucket. And we're talking probably about billions of dollars in funds that 1% is getting paid to one person who's that agent every single year.
Okay. I thought it was more looked at as like an investment type thing.
It is, but somebody's got to manage that risk because there's
it's the risk of the. Okay, now I get it.
Somebody's got to manage that risk because if you're playing in a stock market, which is basically what it is, there's risk involved, and there's always the transfer risk, and that's where the insurance comes in.
Okay, and
I don't specialize in that area. I just know that it's very lucrative.
Gotcha.
So that's not me.
What about like insurance for like special one-off events, like sporting events, like the Super Bowl was here or something like that?
Yeah.
Somebody has to sell that
or
insurance.
Or the hole-in-one at the golf tournament and somebody wins a car. Those are all Lloyd's of London coverage.
Okay.
Typically, the premiums on those are pretty low. Like, let's say we're giving away a Maserati,
right,
$300,000 car. The premium for that, you'd probably end up paying $30,000. For the insurance on that, and it would just be a one-day, one-off thing. But yeah, you'd basically be paying 10% of that vehicle, and if somebody won it, then they would pay it out. Those are through excess lines. Your standard markets and carriers wouldn't insure that type of risk. It's too volatile.
So Lloyd's of London, they do all that kind of the specialty stuff. I always hear them, like whenever I heard about when Michael Jackson had his legs insured.
Yeah, and J-Lo's butt.
Right.
Yeah, all that type of stuff.
They do. Well, what's the value of a company like that? Are there multi-billion-dollar?
Well, the risk of payout on those and the clauses that prevent those claims from being paid are pretty stringent, but people will try to insure anything. I mean, you can buy insurance for just about anything except crime.
Right.
Or a knowing crime. So I mean, like if I own a McDonald's and my employee embezzles $50,000, there's coverage for up to $50,000 for employee dishonesty. But I mean, you can't knowingly. That would be fraud.
Right.
Yeah. So that's about the only thing that you can't. A known peril is the only thing you can't insure.
Gotcha. All right. Well, what's in the podcast talking about a few of the I guess scams. I guess of people trying to make false claims. And I know I want to save the shooting one for last, but
Sure.
start with the bird. Was it a lady?
Yeah, well, it was a family-owned business, and they have a bunch of turkey farms, and they were trying to add a new location and 10,000 birds, and they were really trying to push this through. They'd called like every half hour or so to find out if the paperwork had been processed, and we finally got everything put in place for them. And then the next day they called and filed a claim saying that all 10,000 of their birds were dead. And then through investigation, we found out that the birds were dead 3 days before they even called us to try to insure them.
So how did the birds die?
I think that they all froze.
Okay.
Yeah, I think they all froze out, but you can't. That would be a good example of insurance fraud. A lot of times people will try to. You see this in movies most typically, like the spouse kills the husband, or the wife kills the husband kills the wife right after they put in a large endowment in their insurance or up their life in insurance. That happens a lot, but that's. Well, at least in movies it happens a lot, but this was an instance where it really happened.
So again, asking for a friend. What's the biggest gap of time if you were going to commit a fraud like that you want to when you get the policy versus trying to collect on it?
Well, the more convenient the claim seems, the harder and deeper the carrier is going to investigate.
Right.
And they do have, they call them claims adjusters, but they're really claim deniers.
Okay.
They're going out, everyday example you see is we were talking about earlier, like hail. Some guys will go up in their roof with a ball peen hammer and make a bunch of notches because they have a year or so left on their insurance before it expires, before they have to buy out of pocket to get a new one, and then they'll try to put a claim, or they'll ding their windows, or stuff like that, because the deductible might be $500 or $1,000, but the new roof would be like $30.
Right.
So that's a pretty common thing that happen. And they actually teach claims adjusters for roofs specifically what a ball peen hammer ding looks like versus, so they can suss those out.
Okay. So I got to figure out a new scam before I need to replace the roof.
Now I got some buddies that are in that contractor world that are out there selling those roofs.
I hear a lot of commercials on the radio about the scams of specifically roofing and insurance, where anytime after there's a storm, and I get the phone calls too, like just random ones to my cell phone, like, hey, we're in the area inspecting, so is that a big thing as far as homeowners insurance now? Is that the biggest type of scam, is these companies trying to come in and trick the homeowners or convince them to file a claim?
I don't know if it's a scam. What happens is you need to have 10 hail hits in a square, which is a 10 by 10 foot area, for your roof to be purchased, or that section of roof be purchased. So in the event there's weather tracking and storm watchers and all kinds of different apps that you can have on your phone that track up to 5 years of hail damage. I have some buddies that are in this world that work in that, so they'll go out in blanket areas, but you're going to see anytime there's a hailstorm, you're going to have knocks at the door. And it's usually people from out of town that just came in and they're trying to sell a bunch of roofs. They'll stay here for a week, sell roofs, and then 2 months later, they'll come back and do it. But once they can get you to commit to paying the deductible, the rest of the work doesn't matter, because if they get the deductible and the insurance pays for the first portion of the roof, they're going to do the whole thing regardless if the insurance pays for it. And then they'll put liens. That's where the scam comes in, is they can put liens on your house where you can't sell it without them making their money. And basically they're working themselves into debt, but in the event of a transaction or title change, they will be paid out through the court system. That's the scam.
Gotcha. Another question that made me think of is, and I guess it's relative to where you're at in the country or the world. If you're in Florida, hurricane insurance type stuff is big here. But here in Minnesota, we have pretty extreme wintertime weather. Do you deal with a lot of damage to buildings or
utility
property?
flooding is the most common.
Okay.
Like frozen pipes and stuff. I write an implement dealer down in Altura, Minnesota, and they had a $500,000 flood. Basically, they sell case, IH, farm combines,
right,
tractors, things like that. And their lot was flooded and their building was completely destroyed. And so that's pretty common. But flood insurance is very, very, very difficult, especially in a non-flood area. If you're a homeowner, you can buy flood insurance, but let's say if we get a forecast, tomorrow we're going to get 36 inches of rain. I can't call my insurance and buy a flood policy and put it in place tonight.
Right.
You have to have flood insurance in place for more than 30 days before a claim will pay out.
30 days.
It's got to be 30 days.
Is that true across the board with all natural disaster related things?
No, because a lot of things like landslides, lightning strikes, which may cause fire, wind and hail, tornadoes. Those are all common perils which are going to be covered.
Oh, okay.
But flood's
a little bit more
flood's
unique.
the one anomaly. Yeah. And flood insurance is very cheap. I do recommend all homeowners get it. Typically, you can get a flood insurance a policy for $100-$120 for the year.
And by flood insurance, it's not just like the creek behind your house overflows and it's a pipe bust.
It could be. Well, utilities could be covered under other areas, but yeah, a lot of times, like let's say the city's pipe bursts and floods into your yard and you're on a downgrade,
right.
That wouldn't be your utility and homeowners insurance, and the city's not going to cover it. You would need flood insurance for that.
Wait, the city wouldn't pay for that?
Absolutely not. And that's exactly what happened down in Altura. Is the city's pipe burst and flood their land and ruined their building. They had 2 feet of water in their building and ruined it. And
they have no liability whatsoever.
And the city had no liability to it at all.
Is that unique to that city, or is that?
That's pretty commonplace across the board.
No shit.
Yeah.
So anytime the city fucks up on like infrastructure related stuff, I mean, well, like the bridge collapse, that had to be.
It all has to do with when the work was done. There's the right. We're all pretty familiar with the term that's statute of limitation.
Right.
But there's also the right to.
Boy,
repose.
am I ever.
But there's also the right to repose, and that's typically a 10-year period. Generally speaking, for any damage done or work being performed, there's a 7-year statute of limitations. But then there's also the 10-year right to repose. So like a good example of that would be the 35W bridge collapse. Was done 25 years prior to it happening, so there was nobody held liable to pay those claims or damages or deaths to those people. There was no insurance in place. Wow. That was all picked up by the cities and the taxpayers.
Holy shit. Here's another question I thought of was what do you think about the push to have law enforcement officers privately insure themselves, create their own professional insurance? So if they wrongly shoot somebody or wrongly injure somebody, is that anything that
for picking up like their own defense costs and things like
that?
Yeah,
instead of deferring it to the taxpayers, that's something that the insurance agencies are talking about right now. Is this?
I mean, it would be they're all union employees, right? So I mean, it would be up to that. I would be personally, I'd be for it. I think that would generate a lot of accountability when it comes to that. I'm pretty pro cop in my everyday. I haven't had a lot of bad run-ins with them personally, but then again, I look like I look. But I mean, I'm a bald white guy, but I have mixed kids. My wife's black, and I don't have any hate in my heart either.
Right.
But I still pretty pro. They have a job to do, and there's a lot of shitty people out there, and sometimes you react the wrong way. But I definitely think that, like, especially for this most current lady in, was it Texas, that was playing video games with her kid?
Dude.
The cop didn't announce himself and just fired into there.
I think he said something, but it was like 5 seconds or less or something like that.
Before he opened fire?
Yeah.
I didn't see the video, but yeah, I think that person, the taxpayers shouldn't have to foot that bill, that guy's defense cost, any of that. That's
exactly.
No, I completely agree. I think that could be a whole new racket. I'd insure the cops.
Right. Well, how does that work? What can you tell me about how it is set up right now? Like when, we've had multiple ones here in the Twin Cities where cops are found liable, for wrongly killing somebody or hurting somebody. And there's been multi-millions of dollars paid out to different victims here, just in our city.
I think that's still a municipality responsibility, being that
the cities can't buy an insurance. I guess is what I'm asking. Can they buy an insurance, protect them for if their cops fuck up? Is that?
I don't think that's available. I don't know.
So it just comes straight from city funds, and
I would think so. Yeah.
Okay.
And that's.
Gotcha. 2 more of your stories here. Let's do the kind of what was the good story where you actually kind of save somebody in the nick of time.
Well,
as far as their evaluation of their value.
We were talking a little bit about it earlier: replacement cost, actual cash value, and agreed value. We picked up a new client about 2 years ago, and one of the things that we talked to them about was their building evaluation. It hadn't been done. They've been in operation since the late 60s. They had the same insurance agent forever. And luckily for some guys like me, most agents are kicking down retirement's door. The majority of most agents that I meet at functions are in their, late 60s or late 50s, early 60s, and a few of the guys at our office are like that too. So and like I said, these are bonds. You create friendships and relationships, and they last for a long time, or they should if you're doing your job right.
Right.
Well, his agent had retired, so we created an opening, and we came in and we talked about his building and his property, and he's had like $2 million on his policy, and we said, well, hey, if this thing all burned down today, what do you think it would cost to pay? And he said, I don't know. So we brought in our independent loss control people, and we came up with a building evaluation of $4 million, and
So
we adjusted
tell me about that. Individual. Say it again. Loss control.
Independent loss control.
So
we have our own claims managers and our loss control agents, but for special cases, especially with older buildings, we bring in specialty people, and one of them's ILC, Independent Loss Control. And
so they just go floor to floor and just do evaluation of the value of it?
They not only assess the value of the building, but they also assess any risks involved with the building, and then what it would cost to replace. So you have to imagine, since the 60s, there's been all kinds of innovations, be it from bathroom stalls, you got the bars and the handles and the handicap things, sprinkler systems, security systems. Even when it boils down to rebuilding your parking lot, if you have a building that was built in the 70s, you may only have one handicap space or none at all. But if you were going to redo that building today, you'd have to be up with today's code, and it would have to be built with materials and things that are all up to today's code. And a lot of times it's more expensive, not only for the labor involved, because labor is more expensive than it was 40 years ago, but the materials are more expensive as well. So we added what's called ordinance and law to his policy, which that means if you don't have ordinance and law, let's say your building's worth $300,000, it's going to cost $300,000 to replace it as is, but you can't legally build this building the way it was built before because all these new amenities need to be here, and that stuff's going to cost an extra $60,000. Well, if you don't have ordinance and law coverage, that $60,000's out of pocket. So if you add that in there, and typically it's only a couple $100 for an annual policy to be added to it, but that's a big flaw I see in a lot of commercial properties is ordinance and laws. It's not there, and it should be. But in this instance, his building property was vastly more valuable than what he had it insured for. So we increased his limits by almost double, and it was roughly $4 million. And 3 months later, he had a fire and everything burned down.
Wow.
So in this case, he would have paid $2 million out of pocket if he wanted to reopen his business. In this instance, also, he didn't opt, and I made him sign for this, he didn't opt for business interruption and business income with extra expense. Now, what that is, well, let's say I have a furniture store, just easy. And I sell furniture out of my location, and my building burns down, all my inventory, which would be covered under property, and the building burns down. But now I have to go find a new place to open and operate while my place is being restored so I can still continue to make money. If you have business income with extra expense, it not only pays the retail value for the property that you lost, but it also will make up for whatever dollars that you would have made in sales and operating cost and payroll while this is taking place. And a lot of small businesses, manufacturing places that have fires, they lose their good employees because if they're not a business owner and they don't have 6-8 months of savings, what are they going to do? They're going to go find another job while their place is getting rebuilt, and you lose people. So business income with extra expense is one of the most important lines that you need to have.
That allows them to pay employees while they're rebuilding or whatever.
It allows them to pay their payroll dollars, pay their health insurance, pay all their expenses, and collect the money that they would have made if they were operating as per usual, as if nothing happened. So let's say if I've been selling $20,000 in furniture a week, and now I'm shut down for 8 months, I'm going to get that $80,000 a month in addition cash value back to me that I would have been making had I been able to operate.
Wow.
Not only that, but pay for a new location for me to open a satellite until my building's restored.
Okay.
So
in the example that you gave, the story, how much did you end up saving him after that fire?
Well, we ended up getting him his full $4 million paid out, and they built the building up, a brand new, beautiful facility. But in this instance, he did not opt for that business income with extra expense, and ultimately, they ended up selling off half of their property. They're still operating on a smaller scale, but they had to, because and I made him sign off on it. And I said, "Are you sure you don't want this? Because if this happens, you're not going to have the money to pay your people, and you're not going to continue to get your income." And he said, "No, I don't want it. I don't need it." But,
Okay.
I don't know. He got his building back, and then what they lost in operating costs, they sold off in pieces of property that were newly rebuilt, and they're still operating fine, but they ended up taking a pretty big step back.
Well, I guess he's going to sign it this time, though, right?
Yeah, he's got it now.
So let's end with this wild, crazy story that's still going through its process, right?
Yeah,
I mean, it's not even resolved yet.
This is an active claim that's happening. One of the contractors that we insure, and this is a weird thing because we're not really sure who's going to be at fault here and who's going to end up paying or how much is going to be paid.
So this is kind of like new insurance ground,
Yeah,
right?
this-
It's kind
this
of,
is-
you're setting the precedent for future cases.
We might be. There's a contractor who works, it's an over-the-road contract, so they work at multiple locations and they do different sites each day. One of their employees, on their way home, traveling to their residence from a job site in a company vehicle, was driving and was cut off and engaged into a verbal battle and road rage, swerving back and forth incident with a pedestrian, and ended up brandishing a gun, which you're not allowed to carry in any contractor vehicle. You're not allowed.
Wait, you said it was a pedestrian or somebody in another vehicle?
In another vehicle.
Okay.
Well, another commuter.
Commuter,
Sorry.
okay.
Pedestrian's the wrong word. And ended up pulling a firearm out from under his vehicle and shot through his driver's side window into the adjacent.
Again, in the company vehicle.
In the company vehicle,
Jesus.
shot into another commuter's car, hit the driver in the jaw, and they swerved and crashed into a pylon or hit into something, and the guy ended up going home, and this happened on a Friday night. And by Monday, under his own dime, the employee had replaced the broken window and basically tried to cover this up.
Right.
And through the reports being that he was in a company vehicle.
Because the guy he shot didn't notice the name of the company plastered on the side of the vehicle.
Who
Holy
doesn't know?
shit.
That was one of the biggest giveaways that I saw. I don't know if you saw the new El Camino movie. Did you see El
Not
Camino?
yet.
Okay, well, I'm not going to spoil anything, but there's a similar situation where he's driving around in a company vehicle, and it's like, oh yeah, well, how hard is it going to be to track that guy down?
Right.
But so he gets found out, and the company ends up helping bring this guy to justice, but he had replaced the vehicle and was just acting as if nothing happened. So I get a call.
Now, the investigation on this, that had been done by law enforcement at that point. And then
it had been done, but the contractor company client of ours ended up turning this guy over to the authorities. He was identified, and they found out that where he went and got the window replaced, and like I said, he paid for it out of his own pocket, and he was trying to cover it up, but they ended up turning him in. And I get a call from a CFO at 7 a.m, telling me this crazy story, and that's not something that I'm still a younger person. I'm not really sure, how you're supposed to handle that. So I roundtabled it with our senior leadership, and we got attorneys involved, and we're trying to figure out if they're going to be liable, because he wasn't on the clock when he did this. He was on his way home, and he's in a company truck.
Right.
So, and we also have added to their fleet since then, a new program called telematics, which is something you can put in a commercial vehicle. It's similar to LoJack in that it has the GPS capability, but then it also monitors any erratic stops, starts, run times, and now there's all kinds of crazy monitoring that they have in their vehicles.
I know UPS does something like that too. Like they know everything. Like if you leave the bulkhead door open in the cargo area.
Yeah, so we've implemented that in there, and we ended up getting the carrier to pick up the cost for it, which is crazy. But yeah, that's the most recent one that I had to get off the phone with the CFO a couple 4 weeks ago. That happened.
Can you tell me, is the guy who was shot, is he alive?
He did live, but again, we're looking at a claim based on that. Is what's his quality of life going to be, and how do you evaluate not only the physical ramifications of, getting him better, physical therapy and everything that's going to go into it. But now he's probably going to have, all kinds of pain and suffering from behind that, from now being a disfigured person. And what's the dollar amount of that? And how does that get determined?
Holy shit.
So, yeah.
Wow.
That was my Monday, the first or second week of September.
We'll have to bring you back on and find out what the resolution was and how things changed. Yeah. So any parting thought on insurance? Anyone to dispel any myths or give anybody some good advice and as far as insurance goes? From
a business owner perspective, I would say pick your broker. Create an RFP, which is a request for proposal. Know the services that you're getting from your broker. If it's something as simple as you like how quickly they are able to issue certifications or get you your auto ID cards, then you're not getting any value for your dollar. That's pretty much the main thing that I hear. We have no complaints. Well, yeah, but what are they doing for you? Right. Because your agent should be able to pick up safety training costs for you. They should be able to come out and help you online enroll your people directly, so it's not a headache that you should have. If you're a smaller company and you don't have an HR department, which most mom and pop shops with 50 employees or less don't have the funds to pay for an HR person, where are you getting that outside advice? We have all kinds of programs that we implement to work fluidly with what you guys are doing. I feel like I'm an infomercial now. Right. But you should be getting a lot more than just a binder. And there's just, talk to your agent about what they can be doing. Make sure that they have all the markets that you would want for your specific industry, because having two agents compete for your business is doing you a great disservice. Because whether you know it or not, it's not just an email that gets sent off to a carrier with a brief explanation of your business. We sit down with the underwriters and we get to know them. We showcase who our clients are in the best light. And if you have two different agents that are trying to go to the same market, it doesn't matter who you want in there. The first one who got there is the only one that market's going to talk to. And they might not be telling the best story about your business, and they might not be showcasing you in the best light. So make sure that your agent takes the time to, get out with you, get to know you, walk a day in your life. That way, when they're explaining what your business is all about, they're getting you the best return.
Consider the service versus just the cost of the policy itself. Yeah. Good advice. Thank you for the conversation.
Thank you.